Hi, welcome to Dig Into China. I'm Dong Shang. Thank you for tuning in. Your support means the world and plays a crucial role in the YouTube algorithm. Liking, sharing, and subscribing not only show your support, but also help YouTube recommend my videos to a broader audience. Thank you very much. Xi Jinping's economic policies have encountered yet another illustration of their shortcomings. 2 years ago, a noteworthy event occurred when homeowners of unfinished buildings in China collectively protested by suspending mortgage loan payments. Although banks initially maintained a tough stance, claiming minimal impact on themselves, they were internally concerned due to insufficient manpower to manage the high volume of non-performing loans. In response to public pressure, Xi Jinping intervened decisively, declaring, "I will handle this unfinished building problem." Subsequently, Xi Jinping personally oversaw efforts, rallying the nation to complete the buildings and instructing the central bank to allocate a special loan of 350 billion yuan for the continuation of unfinished building projects nationwide. By the end of 2023, the central bank confirmed that the entire 350 billion yuan had been allocated to local governments as intended. However, despite this significant investment in the building completion assurance policy, the campaign to finish the construction of unfinished buildings failed. Why did this campaign falter? Was it due to speculation that the funds were diverted by local governments? Surprisingly, the reality is more complex. If it were so simple, it wouldn't serve as a notable case in economic analysis. In this segment, we'll explore why Xi Jinping's initiative to ensure the completion of unfinished buildings ended in failure and why it has become a notable cautionary tale in Xi Jinping's economic philosophy. Ever since Xi Jinping assumed direct control over economic matters, he has displayed a tendency to have high expectations but encounter harsh realities. While his visions may be lofty, the actual outcomes often prove challenging. Let's explore how his initiative to ensure buildings completion was planned, and I'll provide a detailed overview. Xi Jinping's perspective on this matter is as follows. How did these unfinished buildings come about? It's simply because real estate companies defaulted and ran out of funds to complete construction. So, I will allocate some funds to appease the public. Each region can select unfinished building projects. If there are still unsold units with some value left, prioritize those projects. The central bank will provide a special loan of 350 billion yuan and the commercial banks can provide additional support. Just build the houses up to habitable standards. Try to include as many projects as possible. This way, we can reduce the number of affected people by unfinished buildings. With fewer people affected, they won't gather and cause trouble, right? This outlines Xi Jinping's thought process behind the building completion assurance policy. However, an ironic twist unfolded. Xi Jinping's entire 350 billion yuan allocation was fully utilized for the unfinished building projects. Furthermore, local governments earnestly presented project proposals detailing plans, funding gaps, remaining property value, and estimated loan recovery periods. Each project underwent meticulous scrutiny from Beijing, suggesting smooth implementation. Yet, despite funds disbursed and construction initiated, loan repayments were significantly delayed as scheduled. Why? Because the homeowners of these unfinished buildings, believe it or not, refused to cooperate. These buyers of unfinished buildings, some of whom only made down payments and had no interest in obtaining mortgages, chose not to pursue mortgage arrangements. Without mortgage applications, banks couldn't release mortgage funds to the project companies, leading to the inability to recover the funds earmarked for building completion. For instance, in a particular city, 28 unfinished buildings projects were reported to the central government. Funds were disbursed and the construction was completed. However, not one of these projects managed to retrieve the loans as originally intended. It's fair to say that the local governments were completely out of touch with public sentiment. Their plans were self-centered and lacked any understanding of the desires of the owners of unfinished buildings. Last year, a Chinese couple named Liang Liang and Li Jun gained widespread sympathy online after purchasing an unfinished building. However, they soon found themselves at the center of public scrutiny and were exploited for political stability. Eventually, abandoned by all sides, they were forced to return to their hometown under the strain of life's challenges. Their dreams shattered. Many in China eagerly await the chance to move into their new homes, regardless of whether it's for financial system security or social stability. The government at least devised a policy. However, the Building Completion Assurance Initiative turned into a unilateral effort by the Communist Party, contrary to the people's wishes. Even after the completion of the buildings, people were reluctant to accept them, making it quite a laughable situation. So, what's the matter after all? Let me tell you about the demands of the owners of unfinished buildings. To begin with, when homeowners purchased their properties, the prices were already inflated. Some unfinished buildings have remained incomplete for many years. Previously, property prices were quite high. For instance, 3 years ago, a property might have cost 10,000 yuan per square meter, whereas now, neighboring areas without unfinished buildings are selling for only 6,000 yuan per square meter. Homeowners have already made down payments, but mortgage loans haven't been arranged yet. Ideally, after the completion of the building, homeowners should approach the bank to arrange mortgage loans. However, the dilemma arises. Should homeowners apply for mortgage based on the original purchase price of 10,000 yuan per square meter or the current market price of 6,000 yuan per square meter? If they are asked to apply for mortgages based on the original price, they would likely resist, facing the choice of either forfeiting their down payment or committing to decades of loan repayment far exceeding the property's current market value. Another segment of owners of unfinished buildings had already secured mortgages. However, during the collective loan suspension protest, local governments aiming to maintain stability instructed the banks to freeze their mortgage loans, allowing them to temporarily halt repayments. Now that the buildings are completed, in theory, everyone should resume their mortgage repayments. However, homeowners are also unwilling to do so. The rationale is similar. If they don't resume payments, they might only lose the money they've already invested in. But if they do resume, they'll end up losing even more over the next few decades. Therefore, the losses incurred by the banks cannot be recouped. Another dilemma from homeowners is the exceedingly poor quality of construction, which renders them unwilling to move in. When Beijing introduced the Building Completion Assurance Policy, local governments were permitted to prioritize habitability, adhering only to the minimum standards. However, the homeowners are the ones who will eventually inhabit these buildings, so naturally they are concerned about the quality of construction. Some time back, I came across a video showcasing a high-rise apartment bought by a family in China. In a frightening turn of events, the entire living room was blown away by a gust of wind, resulting in a tragic loss of life. This incident highlights a grave concern. When homes in China are expected to undergo stringent quality inspections due to their direct impact on people's safety, it's apparent that the resumption of construction on unfinished buildings may involve cutting corners to save costs. Therefore, strict adherence to quality inspection requirements seems unlikely. Furthermore, when homeowners initially purchased their properties, developers made commitments regarding wall materials, green space allocation, decoration standards, and more. Sadly, these commitments have been disregarded. Consequently, homeowners are demanding the renegotiation of property purchase contracts. Given the deteriorated quality of the houses, it's only fair to revise prices downward, thereby reducing the burden of mortgage payments. Some homeowners have a third demand. They are seeking partial compensation. Given the delayed delivery of these properties, which constitutes a breach of contract, and considering that the government has intervened, it's reasonable to arrange compensation accordingly. Due to homeowners' widespread demands and the government's inability to meet them, the building completion assurance movement has reached an impasse. Despite local governments securing funding from the central government for these unfinished building projects, homeowners refuse to proceed with mortgage extensions or accept the completed properties. Consequently, these projects remain unfinished, transitioning from pre-sale properties to completed yet unoccupied ones. Chairman Xi Jinping's allocation of 350 billion yuan for this purpose appears puzzling. Would you consider this a classic example of policy failure? The recent building completion assurance movement has brought to light two governing issues within the current Chinese Communist Party administration. Firstly, there is a tendency at the central level to set high aspirations but to struggle with execution, with decisions often influenced by bureaucratic interests rather than a genuine understanding of public sentiment. Xi Jinping's decision-making based on limited grassroots understanding resulted in hasty decisions and fund allocations. Secondly, local governments lack experience in engaging with grassroots communities, often making presumptuous plans and overlooking the risk of homeowners refusing to sign for completed properties. Overall, it underscores a disconnect between officials and the concerns of ordinary people, with officials primarily focused on resolving their own issues. In reality, local governments could have addressed issues of unfinished buildings by initiating discussions with homeowners before allocating funds for construction. They could have informed homeowners in advance about the standards and quality levels the construction would meet, while homeowners could have expressed their demands such as renegotiating loan contracts, lowering property prices, or seeking compensation. Subsequently, both parties could have engaged in negotiations, making concessions to reach a mutual agreement. Once consensus was achieved, all homeowners and the government could have signed an agreement indicating their intention for construction. With this agreement in place, local governments could proceed with the construction of the unfinished buildings, ensuring the recovery of investments and the resolution of the unfinished building problem. Looking at the current scenario, it's evident that the local governments have been making unilateral decisions without considering the concerns of homeowners. They seemed to assume that homeowners would unquestionably accept the completed property once they were built. Perhaps the disconnect stems from officials being out of touch with the public for too long, unable to emphasize or understand the homeowners' perspectives. If you were in the shoes of someone who purchased an unfinished building with property prices declining daily, would you still want to continue repaying the mortgage? Facing the prospect of losing your down payments or becoming burdened with mortgage payments for the next 30 years, it's likely that most people would seek to minimize their losses and make the most prudent choice. Moreover, human desires tend to expand over time and economic conditions are subject to change. Therefore, the most effective way to settle disputes is by adhering strictly to contracts and agreements. When homeowners initially purchased unfinished buildings, they felt wronged and understandably sought justice. At that point, many may have been willing to overlook minor quality issues just to secure ownership of the property. However, when the government pledged to complete the buildings, homeowners suddenly found themselves in a different situation. They realized that the property values had significantly dropped and the poor quality of the buildings rendered them uninhabitable. Unable to sell these subpar properties to recoup their losses, homeowners naturally began demanding more, such as compensation or renegotiated mortgage terms. This shift in attitude may leave the government feeling perplexed, as homeowners had originally sought assistance solely to complete the buildings. Homeowners simply sought to have their buildings completed, but local governments presumed otherwise without engaging in meaningful dialogue with them. They never truly listened to the homeowners' grievances. Perhaps they only saw homeowners protesting with banners and assumed that was the extent of their demands. If local governments had taken the initiative to sit down with all homeowners before resuming construction on the unfinished buildings and signed an intention agreement, fully listening to everyone's demands and reaching a consensus, many troubles would have been avoided. By strictly adhering to contracts and agreements, they could have prevented numerous complications. However, they chose to act on their own assumptions. In all fairness, it's reasonable for the government to step in and tackle the problem of unfinished buildings, considering that a substantial portion of funds in the real estate sector flow into local government budgets through land sales. It's not unreasonable to expect the government to allocate some of those funds to complete these buildings. This would essentially involve reinvesting a portion of the revenue from land sales back into addressing the community's needs. Additionally, homeowners' requests for compensation and the renegotiation of new purchase contracts are entirely justified. If the government did not secure homeowners' agreement to waive compensation before resuming construction on the unfinished buildings, then homeowners' current demands hold legal and ethical weight. Accusations of extortion have no basis in this context. The current predicament of the building completion assurance movement largely reflects the inadequate administrative capabilities of Communist Party governments at all levels. Officials have become increasingly disconnected from the public, resulting in many of the difficulties being attributable to parties' own actions. Consider this scenario. If local governments are held responsible for the inability to retrieve the 350 billion yuan allocated by Xi Jinping for the building completion assurance program, how might they react? They could resort to forcing homeowners to sign for completed properties, compelling them to obtain loans from banks, or even implementing measures that could lead to homeowners being saddled with loans and forced property acquisitions. This could result in further harm and losses for homeowners of unfinished buildings and could potentially escalate to life-threatening situations. Thank you for watching. Please like, leave a comment, and subscribe to my channel. Just click the subscribe button right here. I'll see you again shortly. Until then, be well.